Stephen Willis. I understand Hubbard wrote that about 2% of the population were essentially degraded beings. However, did he define all of these people as SPs, or is this term reserved just for enemies, perceived or otherwise, of Scientology? Or am I wrong altogether, and is the title SP reserved just for somebody such as yourself, who at some point has been specifically scheduled by the church? Okay, well, let me tell you what I know about these two terms, degraded beings, or DBs, and suppressive persons, or SPs. Two different things. Hubbard has written a couple issues. I think one was called Alter Is and Degraded Beings. Alter Is a Scientology term. We won't get into that right now. But in this issue, he talked about how a certain percentage of the population were degraded beings, and they were going to remain degraded beings until they got up through OT level 3, which is the Xenu stuff. Up until they got through that section of the bridge, they were going to be low-class, low-case, degraded beings. They were just people who, you know, were very much victims of that whole Xenu incident, and were so bad off that they just, you know, with their body thetans and all that all the time. Of course, in that issue, he didn't talk about body thetans because it's not a confidential issue, and all the body thetan stuff is very confidential and hush-hush. That is very different from a suppressive person. Okay, so here you have this class of people who are just screwed up, and Hubbard called them degraded beings. And he also referred to, or used the term degraded beings, to describe people who join the Sea Org and then leave it, because they can't cut it, right? They couldn't cut the mustard. They weren't good enough. They couldn't deal with the responsibility and the harsh discipline or whatever. And so out they go, and he'd let them go, but he said those guys are DBs, or degraded beings. Nice labeling for everybody who didn't want to go along with his little army or navy. So that is an issue that Hubbard talks about, and that's a policy letter called Sea Org Resignations, where he says that. So then, that's a whole different concept from a suppressive person. A suppressive person is the antisocial personality. It's the merchant of chaos. It's the person who is kind of like loopy and is operating on the principle that that he has to get everybody before they get him. Right? Hubbard said he operated in fear, that they're actually afraid of everybody else, and that they are stuck in some incident from long, long ago in the past. This was Hubbard's technical explanation for a suppressive person, is that the person was going along in life and he got stuck in some incident, some horrible things, like a battle, let's say, where he's, you know, charging over the hill and there's all these muskets and he gets shot and stabbed and killed horribly and all that. But there's this stuck picture, there's this stuck aspect to it where the person as a spiritual being is now stuck seeing the world through this filter of this incident that occurred to them, and everybody that they see is filtered through this picture where they're enemies to this person, right? To the suppressive person. The suppressive person sees everybody and anybody around him as an enemy or potential enemy, and therefore is operating on the idea that he has to do them before they do him. And so this is where evil is born, and this sort of thing, right? Where you have these people who, because they're suppressive people, Hubbard lists out these characteristics to them, like they can't get things done very easily. They're always selecting he calls it the wrong target. If the tire, the example he gives is if the tire is flat on his car, he'll kick the cat in anger and frustration. And that's, you know, he should be handling the car, but he's kicking the cat, right? He's just selecting the wrong target all the time. And they speak in generalities, right? Everybody says, everybody knows this, you know, well, you know what they say about you, you know, and this is how they talk. They do not respond to help, or mental help or therapy or treatment. They don't respond to it. And Hubbard said that there was only a couple of very precise auditing actions he had developed which would actually handle this stuck picture, stuck incident, and get them unsuppressived. But Hubbard then said later on, yeah, I've discovered how to do that, but you know what, these are such bad people. I mean, we're talking about the psychopaths of society, that why would we go out of our way to try to help them? Screw them, right, basically. So that's how he refers to and talks about SPs. And of course, the church has used the suppressive person policy to ostracize and get rid of, sequester and kick out political dissidents. Like they've used it politically to get rid of people who are critical of the church or its leaders. That Hubbard started that, Miscavige has continued it, amped it up even. And so anybody who now, a suppressive person, is pretty much anybody who speaks out against the church or tries to stop Scientology in some way. That's how Scientologists see it, by the way, is they don't look at people who speak out against the church and go, oh, you got a good point there. Or, gee, wow, I hadn't really thought about, wow, yeah. I mean, David Miscavige really does wear all those expensive clothes. He's a Sea Org member. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. So they don't look at it that way. They look at it as you're criticizing the church or you're criticizing the church's leaders, and therefore your goal in doing that is to try to stop Scientology, and therefore you're suppressive. You're a suppressive person, right? It could never be that you're doing this, you're criticizing the church or trying to correct its errors or something. It could never be that you're trying to do this because you're legitimately trying to make the place better. It's always about how you're trying to stop Scientology, and that's how they interpret it. And so that's why you get declared a suppressive person and kicked out, which is what happened to me. So that's the difference between those terms.